Hey guys, it's that bloke again called Taz101 Saga, and I'm throwing a better spring in this gun today, so I thought I'd take the opportunity to do a takedown and reassembly. I'm doing this because there's literally no good videos on the internet of how to take down the AGM MP40, and a few people have said, you know, expressed that, so I thought I'd do it. Right, so first thing you want to do, obviously no battery, at least attach the sling from that. You don't need to take it off the whole thing. I personally can't be bothered, so you know, I'll just leave it. And you need to have your needs a screwdriver. You want a long one as well that you can stick in the spring guide to stop it popping out once you get to the gearbox. So you got you're gonna have the two here, one in the pistol grip. First thing you want to do though is you're going to separate the receivers as you would do to get to the battery. So just flip your little takedown button thing there, and the whole lot just comes apart. In terms of basic takedown, you don't need this part anymore, so just throw that to one side, out the way. Get out of the way so you can get to those better. Right, so we're just going to start by undoing these. Right, got 1, 2, make sure you keep those. Then your screws will just come out. That one likes a little bit of assistance. There you go. Right, you can just pry these off with your fingernail if possible, which is something I actually don't really have, fingernails, but there's one. You can just push the other one. And it comes off. Throw those out the way. This one's quite easy to get off. Some of these actually separate into two halves. If you had the solid one like mine, or it's just one piece, it doesn't matter too much if it breaks in half anyway, because it's held in by the screw, so whether it's one piece or not, don't worry about it. They're not all the same. You want to knock this pin out on the takedown button right there. It's a bit fussy and it only likes to come out one way. Right, so this little button right here is the one you're going to want to knock out. If your handguards are the two-piece type, you won't need to do this, but mine aren't, so got to knock it. You want to get yourself a little punch that fits and a hammer, preferably one not this big, but you know, it's all I've got at the moment. You just tap that gently and that will come out. Just yank that out and then your button comes off. I always stick it back in just so you don't lose it. Right, once you've done that, you can just pop the handguard off. So it joins at the back there underneath, well, the back of the motor cage under the wiring. You'll be able to see it in person. Just pry that apart, slide it down, and it will just slide off the front. Make sure you don't hit all the wires as well, because there's a few in there. And there you go, there's the handguard. Now from this point, you have to remove the little battery off switch there, and then there's 3 screws to get the gearbox out, so it's a piece of cake. So what I tend to do first is get rid of those little ones. So you're going to want a really small head to get those out. Just remove those. I always put those 2 guys in the head cut so you don't lose them. Right. So next thing you want to do, you want to turn this upside down. You got 1, 2, 3. Right. You just want to undo these. Once you've done that, you'll get to this stage where it's kind of just sat in there like that. And at this point, as long as you twist that so it goes through, you can gently just wiggle all this out. Like so. Careful you don't get anything caught anywhere, especially the little battery off switch at the bottom here. It's very delicate, so be careful with that. Right, once you've done that, you don't need this bottom receiver frame or anything anymore. Right, I'll zoom this one in a little so you guys can see it better. Right, first thing you're going to want to do is disconnect the wires from the motor. They're quite loose on mine, so just give them a very gentle little twiddle and they should come off. Obviously there's one on each side. Right, you've got a tiny little screw there. that is what holds the trigger bar on. So basically you pull the trigger, completes the connection right there. So make sure you take good care of this, because if it bends or anything, you're not going to be able to operate the gun easily at all. Right, keep hold of that screw. I tend to take the trigger bar out and I put that screw back in. That's very small, you don't want to lose it. And unless you're taking the motor out of the cage, you're not going to need to mess with the motor anymore. So just turn that whole assembly over. These two screws here hold the motor to the gearbox shell. Wiggle the motor out like that. Right, in order to get the actual shell apart, you're going to want to flip the whole thing over. And the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take the this off the top. So to do that, you're better off getting a flat head, and just there's a little notch there where you can stick it in. Right, so once you loosen that enough, it'll just come off. Put that to one side. Now all you have left is these 4 screws. All the screws are out. You're going to want to. It's a bit difficult with the wiring, so be careful. Put that to one side. You're going to gently want to sort of start prying the shell apart. Now there is a nice hole in the back there where the pinion gear goes in, which is good for you to sort of get started. You can just sort of wiggle that. Mine's on quite solid. There we go, it's a big enough gap now. You just want to stick your screwdriver in the hole. Make sure it's in there. Now most likely the anti-reversal latch is going to sort of ping up slightly. Some of them don't always sit in there well, so make sure you apply a lot of nice pressure on that. And as soon as you got the shell off, there we go. Mine tends to spring out of place. Right, hold all that down. There you go, there's your spring. Alright, once you've done that, anything that's kind of gone flying, there's your anti-reversal latch. Tend to keep these underneath the egg cut so they don't go missing. The anti-reversal latch has a tiny little spring on it, so be careful with that. Then you can take your, that's your main spring there, and your spring guide, put that to one side. Normally the gears would pop out like this, but obviously on video everything turns into chaos instantly. There's your little takedown part, and you have a tiny little spring there, obviously, which holds on your tappet plate. So you're going to want to get a nice tiny little screw head so you can gently pry that out. And make sure you keep pressure on it, because this is all under sort of spring pressure, and once that flips up, there you go, you can then remove the rest of this stuff. So if you gently take that out, there's your piston, cylinder, nozzle and all that stuff. Right, that's obviously where the wires sit, and then you can gently remove the gears. So basically I have to do a little bit of internal work on this, and so I'll cut the video here, and then when I get to reassembly, we'll go over that. Right, I'm all done, so let's get back to the reassembly. Now, this is not the most pleasant gun to reassemble. In my experience, the M4 and the AK I have is significantly easier, because there's a lot of bits in this that can just sort of pop here, pop there, they just don't like sitting together and whatnot. But once you've done everything, make sure you don't, if you have reshimmed the gun, which I have a while ago, make sure you don't lose any of the shims, and the bushings like to just sit on my gear axles on mine. They don't tend to just stay in the shell, but whatever. So first you want to put your gears back. Right, then you're going to want to place this assembly back. Make sure you don't lose that little spring that holds the tappet plate in the forward position. So drop all that down in there. Now on the cylinder head you have a couple of holes which sit on these little pins on the shell, so make sure that they go in and they're sat where they should be, which they are. And make sure that the guide rails on the piston is sat where the rails are on the shell as well. Then you're going to want your tiny little flathead again. We'll get to these pieces in a second. You're going to want to pull this spring. This is the same for all gearboxes, so you know, if you're not understanding from this video or whatever, you can just look up any, really, it's the same concept. This holds your tappet plate forward and pulls it back after each cycle, so you're going to want to place that back over there. So if you just get a flat head and just pull it over, make sure it stays flat though, because the tappet plate will want to jump up. Right, next thing you're going to want to put your little takedown piece back in there. That's what attaches to the takedown button. Once you've done that, you will want to stick your anti-reversal latch back in. Now make sure you got the spring the right way round, because it's meant to keep it under spring pressure against your gear, obviously. And once you've sat it in like that, you're going to want to pry it the other way so you can put your gear in. So if you hold it out of the way like that, you place your gear, because it's got to stop it spinning backwards, which is what it does. Then you want to stick your spring in the end of your piston and your guide. Gently put that all the way till it contacts the head inside. Make sure that your anti-reversal latch stays down. Mine's a bit of a bitch, it pops out a lot. And obviously there's all these little holes here which have to line up with various parts of the casing. So squash that flat in there. Now you want to keep the screwdriver in there, that's important. Yeah. Gently lower that down. The anti-reversal latch doesn't like to go in well, and I'm going to have to go at that from behind, so what I'll do is I'll cut it just here so I can sort that out. Right, there we go. I had to mess that around a bit, but we're back in there now. There you go. Make sure everything's nice and flush, and obviously make sure this is moving and returning under spring pressure, which it is. Once you've done that, it's a good idea to put the screws back in pretty fast, so make sure you get yourself a little one there, and we can start putting the screws back in. Right, once you've done those up nice and tight, you can put the plate back on the top. That'll just slide on. Once you got it to a certain point, you'll probably have to start hammering it. I don't put mine all the way on, there's no point. Right, flip that over, and you can access the screws where the motor will go. So grab your motor, attach this back on. There we go. Now you place your screws back in. They should pop in easily. Right, after you've tightened those up, we're going to want to put the trigger bar back in. So obviously it sort of is kind of curved at the end, so you're going to want to start by putting it in vertically like that, and then slotting it over. Slot it over that hole. You can place the screw back inside. Now you want to check that that works properly, which it does. You can see that operating right there. Right, then you can start to place the connections back on. There we go. And that's more or less your gearbox and motor back together. Same as you got it out, just lower that straight back in. Make sure you line the trigger up with the slot for it before you start pulling that all the way down, otherwise you won't be able to get that in. So just gently sort of pull those two through, and you want to make sure that the battery cut off the bottom of the grip goes back into that slot that it sits in before you pull it all the way down. Make sure those two holes for the screws line up. There's no particular place where it just sort of clicks in place. You just want to line up the screw holes at the bottom. You'll be able to see what I'm talking about. Now, the screw that's closest to the trigger has a slightly different screw. It's more of like a rounded top, where the others are kind of flat. So that's how you can tell which goes in which. After that, you just got to put these two little tiny ones back in, so you need to switch to a small screw head again. Right, now these ones can be a little bit finicky. You want to make sure that you line these holes up real good, and they can take a few attempts to sort of get them in, but mine go in either way. Some don't, I guess, but just slot those in. Make sure they're actually gripping on the underside, because sometimes they're a pain and they don't want to go in the holes properly. Right, that one's in. You'll know they're not going in because they'll just be pushing the plate on the other side through. So if you're just looking from the side, you can see if they're actually going in or not. Once you put all those in, you want to put the wires back in under there. Give one last final check that all these connections are where they should be. And now you can put the grips back on. Now obviously the little plastic bit which the screw goes through will try and push the little fuse box bit there. So make sure you sort of slide them in like that rather than just dollop them on. Right, so one side has a nut and the other side doesn't. So you place the nut on one side like that, which mine's the left. Then you can put that in, switch over to a flathead real quick. You can start doing that up from the other side. Make sure you keep your finger on it though, on the nut obviously, or it'll just come out. So once again you're going to sort of try and rest the stock. It's a bit of a pain in it, it's a bit of a pain to try and show on camera, but basically you want this hole there, you can see my finger through, right there, you want that to line up obviously with where the takedown button is going to rest. You don't want to clip any of the wires. It's a bit of a hard thing to kind of get on, but you get used to it. Right, make sure you skip the wires there, and these two will basically join up at the back, like that. Make sure that the hole on the gearbox shell lines up, because there's a hole that goes through the shell that holds that in place, and that is lined up. So that's fine, we can stick that nut back in right there. Once again we turn it over, we'll stick that screw in. Alright, there we go, that's all nice and tight. Nut on that side stuck in there anyway, so we can just screw that one back in. Make sure you don't lose those nuts or that's going to be a problem for you. Just realised what a brilliant innuendo I just made. Right, there's a gap in there where you can stick a screwdriver. So what you want to do is you want to pull that out to the point where you can get a screwdriver under it. Now, if you see that button right there, when I move the screwdriver it's moving the button, because you're going to need to pry that out as you put this pin back in. Obviously the holes on here have to line up with the hole on there. You'll figure it out. So basically you want to get it so just the tip of the screwdriver, so you get the best leverage like that, is holding that out. And you slot this on till the holes line up. Then you can fiddle that through there. Can take a while to do it. There you go, mine went in quite easy. Sometimes it takes ages. They sort of like to go in one way, as I said at the start. It's a very fussy pin. If you don't put it in the right hole, it doesn't want to go in. Right, once you got to this stage, only thing left to do is to put the two two receivers back together. Make sure you miss the connector there, you don't snag it. And slide those two together. And twist the button and there you go. Right. Then if you have a sling, just throw that back together. That's easy enough to figure out. And that's pretty much it. If you want to, obviously it's better to do I didn't need to do a function check because I know it works, but if you want to do a function check, it's best to do that before you put the whole gun together. Just run the gearbox with the motor in on its own. So I hope that's been helpful. Thanks for watching. If you got any comments, please rate, comment, subscribe, and see you in the next video.
Uptime! 8 people!